On the 17th of May 1962, a party of pilgrims left King's Cross Station to travel to Stavanger, Norway. As the train pulled out, there seemed to be little of the usual holiday gaiety that accompanies a trip to a foreign land. But there was excitement and wonder, expectancy tinged with sadness, and an attitude of quiet solace. For this was no ordinary holiday. This was a pilgrimage. These were the parents and relatives of the Langfrank schoolboys who died 9 months before in the Stavanger air crash of August 9, 1961. It was an occasion to be remembered, to be recorded, to be preserved. For this long, sad journey was to be a pilgrimage to another land, a land where 34 schoolboys, 2 masters and 3 crew met their death one misty evening when their plane crashed into the side of a mountain. It was this mountain, the Holter Higher Mountain, that the pilgrims were eventually to see. On arrival at Newcastle, the party boarded the motor ship Venus. The crossing could have been smoother, and everyone was glad when the next day the cries of seagulls circling overhead welcomed the party as they neared their destination. They had reached Norway, the land of mountains and streams, cool water, brilliant sunshine, deep fjords and thousands of tiny islands, glowing lush green against the deep blue of the sea and the light blue of the clear sky. Just 23 hours by boat to these beautiful shores of a rugged land. And even if the voyage had been a little rough, at least it was now almost over. There it was, the port of Stavanger. To the pilgrims, this was Norway. What of the people? How would they receive the strangers with whom they now had a common bond? A small crowd had collected at the dockside, women with their children, and men who had taken time off work to welcome their new friends. Schoolboys and schoolgirls, all were anxiously awaiting the arrival of the party from the town of Croydon. It was not long before the ship had docked and the gangplank lowered. Slowly members of the party descended, conscious of all the eyes that were focused on them. However, this crowd was small compared to that assembled for the Independence Day parade. Celebrating the independence of Norway, bands of all sorts and descriptions paraded in the streets of the town of Stavanger. Large numbers of children carrying flags celebrated a day when, a matter of centuries ago, Norway achieved independence from Denmark. Demonstrations of all kinds of talent passed slowly through the main street. What with the painted slogans in the modern idiom, it could almost be England, with beauty queens too. Bands of every description and type, from the most professional-looking ones with full uniform to local school bands showing off their junior talent, accompanied by marching children joining in the noisy procession. But it was a day for dressing up, and anyone who had a chance to obviously did. The Mayor of Stavanger, Jan Jonsson, marched in the parade also, followed by a procession of local officers. Finally, members of the Red Cross, smartly dressed in their pale blue uniforms, marched by and waved a greeting to their English visitors. It was the Red Cross who had brought down their bodies from the mountain. The party would see them again, but first, a trip up the fields. Sylvan scenes shrouded in mist, islands and trees, views similar to those the boys would have seen. And finally, towering majestically into the clouds, a great black mass, the Birketvedt-Jones. Rising over 1,800 feet above the field and plunging 1,600 feet beneath the surface of the water. Gradually the mist lifted and the day brightened. And as the party neared the harbour, the sun came out to shine brilliantly on the deep blue water. Close to the famous Stavanger harbour stands the brick-built 12th century cathedral of St Swithin's, where a memorial service of the boys was held shortly after the plane crash. Today another service was held, this time conducted mainly in English. The party heard the Bishop of Stavanger, Bishop Birketvedt, welcome them on behalf of the Stavanger people. He spoke about the night of the plane crash and how the people of Stavanger and Solar Strand all felt for the bereaved parents in England. And after the service, the congregation stood chatting to their newfound friends, until eventually it was time for them to return to the hotel at Solar Strand. The next day was bright and very clear, and only the sound of the waves breaking on the nearby seashore broke the still morning air. Then at 8 o'clock, the party of pilgrims assembled outside the Solar Strand Hotel, where coaches were to pick them up for the journey to Stavanger. And in Stavanger itself, members of the local Red Cross were forming up and assembling under their leader, Sophus Todesen. Eventually the party, the Red Cross, and many of the local inhabitants boarded the ferry Tau that was to take them on a 15-minute journey across the Heidel Ford to the village called Tau. The weather for that day had been forecast as wet and stormy, and yet it turned out so bright that the weather and the beauty of the Norwegian landscape seemed to demand anything but sadness. Members of the Red Cross group chatted to their newfound friends, and their smiles were not ordinary smiles. They were smiles of a people who had discovered new friends, these strangers from another land. Arriving at Tau, a short journey by road brought them to Holter Farm. Here, one misty evening, only 9 months before, the farmer heard the distant drone of a passing aircraft, and then the explosion as it hit the nearby mountain. Today, the drone was that of a helicopter, ferrying the more elderly representatives of Stavanger's and Croydon's local councils to the top of the 2,100-foot high Holter Higher mountain. But for the many people who had made the pilgrimage today, it was the grassy slopes, the rocky climbs, and the mountain streams. It was to be an exhilarating climb and warm under the bright May sun. The sun, which according to the forecasters, should not have been there. To guide their footsteps up these rock-strewn slopes, blue flags have been strategically placed by members of the Red Cross, and near 1,000 Norwegians climb with them, men, women, and even little children. And there are mountain streams to be crossed. Streams bring the melted snow from the higher slopes of this stark, rocky, but beautiful mountain. Ahead, an even steeper climb to reach the still invisible peak and the place where the plane of Papa Mike crashed into the face of the mountain. Pieces of wreckage, rusting and half hidden among the rocks, lay 100 feet beneath the ragged peak. This was Halter Higher. Above, the veiled cross surmounted by the English and Norwegian flags. The Tower School band waited impatiently for the pilgrims to climb the last few feet. Television and film cameras and technicians, and arresting first arrivals. Back at Halter Farm, the helicopter had almost completed the ferrying of the VIPs. They included the Lady Mayor Croydon, Alder Mrs. Kettle, the Mayor of Stavanger, Jan Janssen, Bishop Berkeley, Bishop of Stavanger, Mr. Ernest Taberner, Croydon's town clerk, RAF officials and representatives of the Stavanger business firms which had helped finance the relatives' trip. Eventually the pilgrims and the many Norwegians gathered around the veiled cross to take part in a unique service, a service on a mountain top, 2,100 feet up, in the silence of the Norwegian air. On behalf of the Red Cross, Sophus Tonson welcomed the pilgrims and then asked Mr. Fowle, the headmaster of Lanfranc School, to unveil the cross. Mr. Fowle, in his reply, spoke of a similar cross they had dedicated only a week before in Croydon's Memorial Garden, close by the Lanfranc School. Then, under the waving flags of the two countries, he unveiled the simple granite cross. It was a moving moment, not less for Bishop Berkeley, who, after the unveiling, dedicated a simple stone cross to the young boys of the school in a plane called Papa Mike. The Tower School band provided the accompaniment. A hymn was sung by the assembled people from two different countries. Then Sir John Walker, British ambassador in Oslo, stepped forward to lay a wreath. Mr. Fowle followed with a wreath on behalf of the Lanfranc School. Next, one from the Red Cross organisation of Stavanger. Finally, a wreath was laid on behalf of Cunard Eagle Airways. Then the parents and relatives came forward to lay their own personal tributes. Bishop Berkeley translated the inscription on the cross, which told of the 34 schoolboys who had lost their lives on the mountain in a plane crash. "20 feet below the grey stone cross was the point where, on that misty evening in August, the plane smashed into the side of the mountain. And the inscription on the brass plaque commemorates the place with 24 simple words in Norwegian, telling of the plane crash of the 9th August 1961. The final departure from this bare, rugged mountain was signalled by the sound of the helicopter starting up and leaving for Halter Farm with the officials of the two countries inside. A few minutes later, the others started to descend on foot, back down to Halter Farm. They were leaving behind them the harsh, rocky slopes of a tragic mountain and a smooth granite cross carved by the hands of a Norwegian stonemason. But it would not be left for good. The Red Cross had promised to care for the cross, and those who left it knew that it stood for something bigger than just a memorial. It stood for the bond of sympathy that existed once in thought and now in action between these two people from different lands. It stood for friendship, for they would meet again. And it stood as a reminder of the 39 who perished one night in August 1961. The mountain Alta higher, the mountain stark and grey, where now only the wind grieves.